Guess who's back?
Welcome back. We made it. Episode 10. A couple of false starts. This is the third episode 10 that I've recorded, but this one's going out and coming at you live from Community College. I'm Sam Morgan, and this is the AoS List Lab. In today's episode, we're talking about an alternate way to play AoS3. As I said, this isn't actually the episode I intended on posting, but we'll cover that in the show. Today we're talking great game, interesting meta, the Warhammer Nuzzlocke. Alright, where are we at? So, Age of Sigmar 3 feels about 6 months old. Perhaps it's less than that, I'm not sure. Time is a flat circle, and I'm coming at you from the world's most locked down city. So the opportunities to play following the release have certainly dried up. It's been it's been challenging to put it mildly, and we find ourselves in a pretty familiar situation. So the episode that I've referenced twice already that hasn't gone out was an op-ed on the state of the meta and the state of the game. I'm going to re-record it because I still want to get my opinion out there. I know every man and his dog has spoken about whether or not AoS3 is good and what the problems are. The version that I recorded came across more negatively than I would have liked. So while I have some constructive feedback for the ecosystem broadly, I'm really enjoying Warhammer. I'm on a hobby streak, which is about to hit 100 days, and I'm really enjoying list building and all these other things. So I think the general tenor of that episode didn't reflect my overall feelings about the hobby and the game, and perhaps were a little bit jaded and tinted by the depressing real life situation we find ourselves in here. Anyway, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're out of lockdown on Thursday, and I'll be at the game store on Friday morning. All right, where are we at? So AoS3 is problematic. There's a variety of reasons that it's problematic, and they, in my opinion, can be distilled down to one word, and that's spam. There are two types of spam which are impacting the game in negative ways, and that's the spamming of the most efficient unit within a particular army, and that's the spamming of defensive buffs, which is led to the rise of characters who have a 1+ save, in some cases ignoring all rend, in some cases re-rolling ones, and then that's coupled with a 5+ after save, which is available to everyone, regardless of the army that you're coming from. So that's really problematic, and then that has a series of flow-on impacts. It's a cascading issue that we'll talk about over the course of this episode, and when I release that next episode, I'll go into some detail and provide some examples of where that's at its worst. I think the core engine is really good. I think the idea of battle tactics is sound. I think the execution of the battle tactics and incentivizing monsters is okay for a season, but it does create a divide, and that's fine so long as over a prolonged period that gap is bridged. So just say, for instance, the things that make Gloomspite and Nighthaunt poor this edition, this season, if it was to be flipped on its head and those were to become strengths of competitive play next season, that's something I'm really comfortable with. If it's perpetually that there are haves and have-nots and they don't swap sides, and that's obviously going to be a longer term problem. But I think in terms of the core engine, I really like a lot of the changes that were introduced in 3rd edition, and I think as a game that they've got a really strong engine there that they can build on. Problematically, the auxiliary material is awful. So when I talk about that, I mean things like the introduction of grand strategies and battle tactics into army books. That is something that creates a level of creep, sort of scope creep that's unnecessary and bloat that's unnecessary. I don't think it adds anything to the game. And then introducing information for matched play through a subscription magazine in 2021 is perverse. So the basically, like if you were to flip a coin and say, do we include grand strategies and battle tactics in army books? And if you were to flip a coin and say, should we drip feed material over a long span of time to players through a periodical magazine, you'd have a 50-50 chance of getting those right, and these guys have stuffed up both of them. So it's disappointing, and I think you make enough small mistakes and you begin to aggravate your player base, and you begin to chip away at that good system you've got there that you should be working off. So basically where we're at is, I think, a bit of a crossroads, and there's a reason that matters, and that's when we have intelligent, astute people like Darren Watson posting this on Twitter. And Darren is a friend of mine. You should go and follow him. It's @PositiveVictim. His tweets are awesome. The stuff that he does around lists over on the Honest Wargamer Darren's list diaries are awesome as well. He's working away at his own battle tome with a level of care and sincerity that I don't think necessarily exists in the official battle tomes. And he sort of said, here's a handy AoS3 list building guide. The main elements are: don't use your faction command trait if possible, or your faction artifacts. Universal ones are likely better. Be a 1-drop, spam efficiency. Either this or walk Gargants onto objectives. Every list is the same, and then he's provided a version where it's just all spammed efficient war scrolls. It's a 1-drop, and it utilizes the Amulet of Destiny, and it illegally utilizes the Arcane Tome as a second artifact. And this is obviously satirical. He's posting this to say that this is a bit boring, and Darren is not from a dissimilar school of thought to myself, and we might be characterized as Johnnies, and that's about wanting to go away and unearth the little combinations, and to utilize on the table the mechanisms in the game to our advantage that mean that we're able to win games on occasion with a list that's worse than our opponents because of the tech, and because of the strategy that we've implemented fighting that uphill battle. And that's something that I feel to an extent has been removed from this edition, and certainly players are incentivized to squeeze all of the best things they can into a low drop army, which everyone now has access to, and they are incentivized to create characters that are unkillable, and they're incentivized, I think, to play simple Warhammer. Like, the Gargants are a simple army, and that overall is disappointing. So I take Darren's point here. He's not the only person that's saying this. There are a number of experienced players who are dissatisfied with the current trajectory of the game. But I think all is not lost. It's not like we're at a crossroads where if we continue down this path that the game will implode or die. That's simply not going to happen. Games Workshop make the most beautiful miniatures on the market, and they're slow, but they are responsive to the feedback of the community more broadly. So so to the extent that they overcorrect. So things, for instance, like the Slanesh book and things like the Savage Orcs are on the receiving end now of past sins. They haven't forgiven them for what they could do in a previous edition, in a previous book, and they're still paying for it now. So to comp or not to comp, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer a game with no combats against a redeploying Khorne Demon Prince, the slings and arrows of outrageous sentinels, or take arms against a 1+ rerollable save, heal 12 wounds per battle round Archaon. We've shuffled into the mortal wound meta. We must give pause. It gives rise to a range of questions, and that's this whole debate around comp. It really goes back to, isn't it incumbent on the company that managed the ecosystem to ensure that there is a degree of competitive balance? And if we introduce, comp that's designed by a community, don't we also inherit their biases and prejudice? And aren't we just moving the goalposts? So if you comp out, as an example, god level characters, doesn't that just make the Stonehorn and the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon and the Phoenix the next man up? Don't they just fill those roles and we have the same problem? So there are some legitimate counter arguments to why community comp doesn't work. we've got this, first they took my Gargants, next they took my Stabbers. It's the slippery slope argument, where someone will say, well, where does this stop? Are you gonna say I can't run Lotan anymore because he's too cheap? You know what I mean? And those arguments are almost always straw man arguments, but the overall sort of position of let's just play it out of the book, and if Games Workshop make mistakes, everyone's suffering from those mistakes. It's a pretty reasonable position to have, and I think we've done some Shakespeare. Let's do the modern day equivalent. The plan was we drink until the pain's over, but what's worse, the pain or the hangover? So obviously that's Kanye Williams' sort of modern day equivalent. So I think introducing a comp system, this is my overall view. Introducing a comp system does not solve the problem that Games Workshop don't competitively balance their books. Now, whether that it's their intent to competitive balance or not, it's a completely separate conversation, and one I'll be having in depth on the next episode. So, if the community does the work of a multinational for free, does that actually solve the problem, or is that in response to the problem? And I think probably I'm a proponent of root cause analysis and addressing the actual reason that things happen and then trying to address that. And from that perspective, I wouldn't be a proponent of introducing comp universally, like the old Swedish comp, for example, which was a thing in Warhammer Fantasy, where you would have a 2,000 point list or a 2,400 point list, and then you would have a Swedish comp score, which is basically trying to measure the strength of your army, and then you would set a range and say, okay, everyone's going to be playing between a Swedish comp 10 and a 15, and we feel like that means everyone that turns up on the day is in a position to win all of their games because the comps are leveler. I don't necessarily think that would work in AoS, either culturally or in terms of systemically, because of the rate of change. You would just constantly be changing the Swedish comp points to the extent that you'd never be able to prepare for a tournament. So we've got this deep philosophical question: whose responsibility is to make sure that there's a good game? Is it the company as the custodians of the system? Is it the players? Is it incumbent on them to pick a fair list? And then, to what extent do tournament organisers and players change the rules in order to address some of the it's not like an inadequacy, right? It's, yeah. In order for them to balance the system. So it got me thinking about my favorite game, Pokemon. And Pokemon is a super simple game. Anyone that was like an 8-year-old with Pokemon Blue or Red will have leveled their Charizard up to level 100 and just walk through the Elite Four, which is the final 5 bosses of the game. And Pokemon games are amazing because to an extent they're open world, and because you can go around and catch and trade and battle your friends and all these things. The world building is brilliant, and the competitive scene is amazing. There are millions of permutations. I play VGC, and on any given night, I might play for hours against builds that I've never played before, because there quite literally is the unlimited permutations for what you can do in terms of your team construction, and then your items, and then your EVs, and then your IVs. So the Nuzzlocke challenge is a set of rules intended to create a higher level of difficulty for the actual game itself. So what that means is that many challengers feel that the rules also serve a purpose in encouraging the use of Pokemon the player would not normally choose, and promoting closer bonds. It's a separate thing. It's not really relevant for our purposes. No one's ever formed a bond with their Kairos, or maybe Bud, but no one aside from Bud has formed a bond with their Kairos. The rules are not in-game functions, but are self-imposed on the part of the player, and that's super important and a subject to variation. So this is coming from our good friends at Bulbapedia. If you want to read more about the Nuzzlocke challenge, if you jump onto Bulbapedia, it's like a Wikipedia for Pokemon, and super simple, right? Super simple. So fainted Pokemon are considered dead. You don't get to revive them. They're out of the game. you can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter in each area, and there's no voluntary reset. You can't be having a bad game and then reset. That's the whole challenge, right? So it's really interesting. Nuzlocks have the most views of any Pokemon content, give or take, on YouTube, because people are fascinated by the handicaps that are put in place. And there are professional Nuzlockers that earn a lot of money just playing variations of these rules. So they might have, for instance, a month or a season where it's like, the Nuzlocke challenge this month is you can only use ghost Pokemon, or the Nuzlocke challenge this month is that you have to swap who your first Pokemon is every battle. Like, there's a whole heap of things. There's unlimited things you could explore in this space, but the important point is it's voluntary, it's self-imposed, and that it incentivizes diversity, which is, I think, really good. And for these particular games, because they are so easy, like I just played Pokemon Shield when it came out and went through the whole game and both the DLCs and never once was defeated. And that's not because I'm brilliant, it's because it's easy. So yeah, I really loved the idea of a Nuzlocke, and it got me thinking about a Warhammer Nuzzlocke. So some caveats here. This isn't a balance patch. This isn't supposed to fix the game. Is the model exploitable? Like, absolutely it's exploitable. And if your objective is to break it, you're probably not the target demographic for this. If everyone used this, then new builds would prevail. And basically you'd be presented with new design challenges. That's the cycle. So if every single person played this way, we would still have builds rise to ascendancy, be so problematic that they're not fun, and then we'd need to look at other things to address. So it would be constant, right? I'm certainly not proposing that everyone pick this up. The intent is to mitigate, and the magnitude of which, builds affect both casual players, but also people that want to be competitive without the tedium of running the same net list as the other 8 players in the top 10. One of the design principles is to mitigate some of the common, obvious, and problematic builds, and to increase variety. So one of the rules that I've proposed here is an example of adverse consequences. So the rule is intended to enhance the ecosystem, but the adverse consequence, and it's around Mega Gargants, is that Nighthawk and Gloomspite, who I think are legitimately lifted like multiple tiers in competitiveness when they've got a Mega Gargant, that those armies, Nighthawk and Gloomspite, would be impacted because they would lose the opportunity to run the Mega. So that obviously is a problem that I'm aware of, but I don't care about. I hate Megas. The other thing is that the Mega is a driving force, right, behind the arms race. If your list passes the Gargant DPS, the damage per second, if your list is like my list pictured here, where I've been running 11 Salamanders, it's likely it's capable of tabling many reasonable builds within 2.5 turns. So by removing the Gargants entirely, right, you disincentivize the ultra high damage builds, because often the ultra high damage builds are predicated on range damage, and range damage obviously is then susceptible to alphas. So you have this sort of cycle thing going on, right? And I think that you have fewer full range damage armies in a meta that doesn't have 140 wounds of big dumb babies. So let's have a look. What have I come up with here? So no battle regiments. Battle regiments are so boring and so tedious. And Darren's thread on Twitter is really interesting because a number of players of varying skill degrees came in on their high horse and said, "Oh, the battle regiment's not a problem. I don't even use it," as if like what an individual person uses is in some way reflective of the broader meta, or whether something's problematic. So it's great that people can build durable lists with 6, 7, or 8 drops and use their superior generalship to then counter deploy and play for first or second and all of those things. But the problem is the battle regiment makes it easy for anyone to build an incredibly strong list that has control before the game's even started. And for instance, this list I've got pictured on the screen, I've got 2 battle regiments, right? One of the battle regiments is a group of salamanders that deploy off board, and then I'm able to protect by using the Realm Shaper engine. I'm able to protect the rest of my army. So I'm a 2-drop, but I can almost always give away first and with no consequence, and that's problematic. If I was a 10-drop, I'd on occasion be given first, and then have to think about, am I going to drop my salamanders with the risk of them being doubled back? It just changes the game dynamic quite a lot, and that's at 2-drop. 1-drop is even worse. The next one is the one-off. Like you can have one of the universal artifacts or command traits. This Master of Magic, coupled with the reroll casts on a combat monster, is awful, and I think limiting that means that everyone's still got access to the 5-up ward if they need it, or the arcane tome if they need it, or reroll chance if they need it. Like, you still get access to it, right? But you don't get your cake and eat it too. You're not getting everything. The next one's the rule of 3. So no battle line unit can be taken more than 3 times. This is to address the spam, and obviously, like a build like my Nighthaunt build, not my Nighthaunt, my Skaven build, for instance, I think maybe has like 11 units of Night Runners and 4 units of Gutter Runners. So that obviously would fail this test, and I'd have to think about some other way of running Skaven. The reason I've capped battle line at 3 is some armies are limited to just the single battle line option, so we don't want them to be invalidated entirely. And then when we move on to other units, it's a rule of 2. No other unit can be taken more than twice. So Salamanders, you can take 2 units of 2. You can have 4 Salamanders. Over the course of the game, you could summon another 3. I mean, you can still get up to 7 Salamanders. But it stops things like the old Eel build, which I know has been pointed out, or the new Shark build, or a number of other problematic builds. Even just spamming of characters. There are some armies that maybe want to take 3 or 4 of the same character, and this looks to address that. And the rule of big dumb babies, no mega gargants. I think that they are a failure from the designer's perspective. They need to have a serious think about how they might work in the future. They're certainly strong. They're probably the strongest, or one of the strongest armies. Certainly if there was some sort of matrix strength of army versus difficulty to play, it'd be super low on the difficulty to play axis and super high on the strength of army axis. So I think by removing them, you actually remove a heap of associated issues, both in terms of the mercenaries and also the army itself. All right, so here's a sample list that I've been building at the moment. This is the Brass Skull. So we're in the Big War. Got a killer boss on Corp Ripper Vulture. It's super sneaky. It has got the Arcane Tome, so that's my use of that. It's a Fasten, and it's got the spell Nasty Hex to turn off wards. I've then got a Wergog Prophet, who's got a 4-up ward because he's going to be staring at people no end, and he's got the Always Strike Last spell, so he's really good. The Warchan has got the Fix Him beat because it's not limited to whom he can fix, so he's able to heal other characters or the monsters. The Weird Knob Shaman's got the great big Hand of Gork, so he's able to teleport an Orc unit, and that includes things like the Kill Boss, and it includes things like the Ard Boys, the Gorg Runners, the Gut Rippers. So that sort of rounds the army out. There's also Ripper's Snarlfangs in there for their 6-inch pile-in, their speed, and some of the technical nuance things that they can do, and then a Rogue Idol. So I know categorically that the Gatebreaker is better than a Rogue Idol. However, the Nuzzlocke doesn't allow me to take it, so I'm running with the Rogue Isle. And I mean, he's able to redeploy using the Corpse Ripper Vulture's, super sneaky ability, and he gives a +1 to cast to 3 of my characters. He gives +1 bravery to units. Because he's an Iron Jaw, I can use the War Channer on him to up his damage. He can do so many things. He can even, he's a totem now, so he can even do the movement in the hero phase. This army, right, it has a lot of options. I've gone with a Warlord for that second artifact and the extra command point the turn I need it, and then Hunters of the Heartlands for the Gut Rippers and the Yard Boys, so that makes them a little bit tankier. But this army, as an example, could be, because it's 10 drops, could be given first turn. Prior to that, I could have moved the 20 Gut Rippers to outside of 9 of my opponent. I can then move my Killer Boss with the Fasten 14 inches in the hero phase. I could move my Rogue Idol 10 inches in the hero phase. I could teleport the 3 Gore Grunters or the 10 Ard Boys. There's so many things, I can do in terms of my own alpha and pinning them in. I can teleport the Wergog Prophet, so that is, within 12, and then I can nest a unit around him so that he's protected, and then he can try and get that always strike last spell off, and then I can double team things with the Killer Boss and Rogue Idol. There's stacks of stuff that this list can do, which is, you know, playing around in that Johnny space, playing around in that what's the tech and what's the culmination of a number of different interactions, and I think it plays the battle tactics game really well, because, you know, the Rogue Idol and Kill Boss could both be in the opponent's deployment turn one. I can hold an objective with 20 Gut Rippers before the game, so if they were to go first, I can still be contesting a central objective. The Kill Boss is really awesome because he allows me to do things twice, so I can do the command ability on the Ard Boys, the rally, so I could rally both units in the same hero phase, which is obviously great because they're rallying on a 4-up, and I could go double all-out defense. There's stacks of stuff that the list can do that on the surface, it might just seem like it's hobbled together, but the way that it works as a unified army is, I think, able to compete. And I reckon I could take this, it's a Nuzzlocke list, but I reckon I could take it 4-1 in an open field. And I reckon with a good run, I could get a 5-0 with this. And that's going to be my objective over the rest of the GHB. I'm going to try and get a 5-0 with Big War. Unfortunately, CanCon's cancelled. I was sort of gearing up towards CanCon, but that's off the cards now. So this is the proof of concept for me that the idea works. And the other thing I'm going to do in the Nuzzlocke space is for our Christmas tournament, I'm going to run the tournament as a normal tournament. So anyone can enter any list, but the podium will be the highest Nuzzlocke player, the second highest, the third highest. So if you come first, with you know a filthy Sentinel spam list, that's cool. You'll know that you had the most battle points, but you won't be first place overall. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to trying this out. I'd be super interested if people have Nuzzlocke lists that they want to share. You can hit me up on Twitter. I think I'm at ListLab there, or maybe at AoS ListLab. I'm one of those. And then, or in the comments here, and I'd love to have a look at them and hear how people do. Obviously, this isn't for everyone, and that's completely cool. But yeah, we'll see how it all goes, I guess. And I've managed to keep it under half an hour, which is excellent because that other episode I was talking about was like 90 minutes. Shout outs, How to Hell Wargaming. You can see these guys on Twitch. They hosted a number of the GCon Online games. GCon Online was a tournament that ran for about the last month. It was a 34-player event, and it was taken out by Salamander's Spam, which would not pass the Nuzzlocke test. It was piloted by me.
King in the castle, king in the castle. Have a chair, I have a chair. Oh, go do this, king in the castle.
And then the other one I just want to shout out is the Model Citizens Painting Challenge. So while we've suffered through this this most recent lockdown, Will, one of the head honchos at the Model Citizens, has run 2 painting challenges, and they've just been awesome. They've inspired me to do my hobby every day. The Discord is just full of fantastic painting. And we've got a couple of guys in there that are just consistently leveling up, and it's just really motivating me to continue to work as hard as I can and to continue to develop as a painter. To that extent, I haven't got him up on the screen, but I've been watching a heap of Trevarian. That is really awesome. I'll put a link to his YouTube in the description, and I've been watching a heap, obviously, of Squidmar and Vince over at Warhammer Weekly with the hobby cheating, and just consuming as much of that as I can. And if I paint for 2 or 3 hours, it's not uncommon for me maybe to watch 2 hours of painting videos, 30 minutes of Paternity Court, and then like 15 minutes of actual competitive Warhammer content. All right, that's me done for today. I actually have another episode ready to post next week, so I'm gonna try and post this one now, one next week, and then go back to a fortnightly schedule as we come out of lockdown and my spirits rise and I start playing games, and I get some of these new painted models on the table that'll hopefully inspire me to be a little bit more active here. But thank you for your patience, and thanks for listening. Feel free to like, subscribe, share with your friends, all those things.